Hey everyone, welcome back to channel, where we bring you incredible stories of courage, resilience, and the power of doing what's right. Today, we're diving into a heart-stopping tale of bravery that took place in what seemed like an ordinary park. What starts as a fun afternoon for a young girl and her brother turns into a nail-biting story of instinct and action. As she uncovers a dangerous secret hidden behind the cheerful tune of an ice cream truck. Stick around to find out how one young girl's quick thinking helped stop a predator in his tracks, and how her courage inspired an entire community to come together. You don't want to miss this one. Before we get started, let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. And if you enjoy inspiring stories like this, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and click that notification bell so you never miss a moment. Let's get into it. The warm sun painted Willow Creek Park in hues of gold, the gentle rustle of leaves mingling with the distant chatter of children. 12-year-old Sienna Harper held her younger brother Lucas's hand as they strolled toward the playground. Lucas, 7 years old and full of boundless energy, hopped on one foot and swung their joined hands. "Can we go to the slides first? Please, Sienna? I bet I can slide down faster than you," Lucas declared, his voice filled with excitement. "We'll see," Sienna replied with a smile, her dark eyes scanning the bustling park. Ever since her mother had started working double shifts at the hospital, Sienna had taken on more responsibility, especially when it came to looking after Lucas. She didn't mind. Lucas was a good kid, and she liked feeling helpful, but it did make her hyper-aware of their surroundings. Their mother, Dr. Ellen Monroe, followed behind, still dressed in her scrubs. She carried her purse in one hand and a reusable coffee cup in the other, her exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. "All right, you two," Ellen said, managing a smile as they reached the playground. "I'll be over there on that bench if you need me." She pointed to a shaded spot near the edge of the play area. "Got it, Mom," Sienna replied, watching as Ellen settled onto the bench and pulled out her phone. No doubt catching up on messages from work. Lucas dashed toward the slides, his sneakers kicking up dust. "Last one, there's a rotten egg," he called out over his shoulder. Sienna laughed and jogged after him, letting him win. She reached the slides in time to see Lucas launch himself down one, his laughter echoing through the air. As she waited for him to climb back up, a familiar sound caught her attention, a cheerful, tinny melody that drifted through the park like a Pied Piper's call. The sound grew louder, and soon a white ice cream truck rolled into view, its melody attracting a crowd of excited children. But something about the truck made Sienna pause. Unlike the brightly colored trucks she was used to, this one was stark white, with no logos or pictures advertising its treats. Even the service window looked oddly plain, framed by clean, unmarked metal. "Free ice cream," the driver called out, his voice as bright as the sunny afternoon. "Come on over, kids, free ice cream for everyone today." Lucas's head whipped around at the sound. "Did he say free ice cream?" he asked, already running toward the truck. "Wait," Sienna called, hurrying to catch up. She grabbed his hand before he could join the growing crowd of children around the truck. "Let's check with Mom first." "But it's free," Lucas protested, tugging against her grip. "I know, but we should still ask," Sienna said firmly. She glanced back at their mother, who was now on the phone, her expression tense. Sienna hesitated. She didn't want to bother Ellen if it was a work call. Instead, she turned her attention back to the truck, her instincts urging her to watch closely. The driver, a man in his 30s with neatly combed brown hair and a blue polo shirt, leaned out of the service window with a wide smile. "Who wants a sundae? Or maybe a chocolate-dipped cone?" he asked, his voice oozing with cheerfulness. Sienna noticed how his eyes darted between the children, lingering on those who stood alone or had wandered away from their parents. Every few moments, he would pull out a small notebook from below the counter and jot something down before handing out another ice cream cone. "Why doesn't the truck have any pictures on it?" Sienna wondered aloud. She couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Most ice cream trucks were covered in colorful decals of popsicles and sundaes, but this one was unnervingly plain. And why was everything free? "Can we please go get some?" Lucas begged, his voice pulling her from her thoughts. "I'll get vanilla, I promise." Sienna knelt in front of him, placing her hands on his small shoulders. "Listen, Lucas, I don't think we should go to that truck. Something about it feels weird." Lucas frowned, his excitement fading into confusion. Weird? It's just ice cream. Maybe. But let's wait for Mom to finish her call. Okay? Then we'll ask her. Lucas sighed dramatically, but he nodded. Fine. Sienna gave him a small smile of encouragement. But her attention returned to the truck. She watched as a little girl in a pink dress approached, clutching a stuffed bunny. The driver's smile grew even wider as he leaned down to talk to her. What's your name, sweetheart? He asked. The girl hesitated, her voice too soft for Sienna to hear. The driver nodded and handed her a cone, but not before writing something in his notebook. Sienna's stomach churned. She glanced at the parents nearby, but most of them were busy on their phones or chatting with each other. No one else seemed to notice anything unusual. What's he writing down? Sienna murmured to herself. She glanced at Lucas, who had started climbing on the monkey bars, then back at the truck. Her instincts told her to keep watching. The driver's gaze swept across the playground, pausing briefly on Lucas. Sienna stiffened, stepping closer to her brother. The man didn't approach, but he scribbled something in his notebook before serving the next child. As the minutes passed, Sienna's unease grew. The man continued handing out free ice cream, his demeanor cheerful but calculated. He seemed to pay special attention to children who were alone, asking them where their parents were or if they lived nearby. Sienna clenched her fists. Something was definitely wrong, but what could she do? She was just a kid. Would anyone even listen to her? Mom's still on the phone, Lucas said, climbing down from the monkey bars. Can we get ice cream now? Not yet, Sienna said, her voice firmer than before. Stay with me, Lucas. Don't go near that truck. Okay? Lucas frowned but nodded. Sienna kept one eye on him and the other on the ice cream truck, determined to figure out what was going on. The sun shone brightly, children laughed and played, and the world seemed ordinary. But deep down, Sienna knew something about this moment would change everything. Sienna's unease grew as the minutes passed. The cheerful melody of the ice cream truck felt jarring, like an out-of-tune instrument in an otherwise harmonious park. The driver's wide smile and overly bright demeanor no longer seemed friendly but rehearsed, almost robotic. Sienna couldn't help but feel that something sinister was hidden behind that cheerful facade. Lucas, oblivious to her worries, had climbed back onto the monkey bars, declaring he could make it all the way across without help. Watch me, Sienna. I'm gonna make it this time, he called out. Go for it, buddy, she replied, keeping her voice light to avoid alarming him. Her protective instincts flared as she glanced back at the truck. The driver was still handing out free ice cream, but now he seemed more focused on a boy standing slightly apart from the other children. The boy, about 8 years old, had messy blonde hair and wore a striped t-shirt. He clutched a toy dinosaur in one hand, his expression hesitant as the man leaned down to speak to him. Sienna couldn't hear their conversation, but the man's gestures were unmistakable. He was pointing to the back of the truck. The boy shook his head, stepping back, but the driver held out an ice cream cone, smiling wider. It's okay, buddy, Sienna heard him say. Your mom asked me to give you this. She's busy right now, but she said you'd love a special treat. Sienna's heart skipped a beat. She scanned the park and spotted the boy's mother sitting on a bench about 20 feet away, engrossed in her phone. She has no idea what's happening, Sienna realized. The boy hesitated again, and Sienna couldn't stay silent any longer. Hey, she called out, striding toward them. Lucas, stay there, she added over her shoulder. The driver straightened as she approached, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. Well, hello there, he said, his tone overly cheerful. Are you here for some ice cream too? Sienna ignored the question, her eyes on the boy. Hey, your mom's over there, she said, pointing to the bench. Why don't you go tell her you're getting ice cream? The boy blinked, then nodded quickly and ran off. Sienna turned back to the driver, her heart pounding but her voice steady. Why did you tell him his mom sent you? She's right there, and I'm pretty sure she didn't. The driver's smile froze, and for a moment, something dark flickered in his eyes. Then he chuckled, holding up his hands. Whoa, slow down, kid, you must have misheard me. I just wanted to make the little guy feel comfortable. I didn't mishear anything, Sienna said, crossing her arms. And your truck doesn't even have a name on it. Where are your permits? The driver's smile tightened. I don't need to explain myself to you, he said, his voice losing some of its forced cheer. I'm just here to hand out free ice cream and make people happy. Sienna glared at him, but before she could say more, a commotion drew their attention. A little girl in a yellow sundress had approached the truck, holding a stuffed bunny. The driver's demeanor changed instantly, his attention snapping to the girl. Hey there, sweetheart, he said, leaning down. What's your name? Sienna felt a chill run down her spine. The girl's eyes darted nervously around the park, and she mumbled something too soft to hear. The driver's smile widened as he handed her an ice cream cone. Why don't you come around back? I've got a special treat for you. No, Sienna shouted, her voice startling the girl. She rushed forward, placing herself between the girl and the truck. You're not going anywhere. The driver's smile vanished entirely, replaced by a cold, hard look. You need to mind your own business, kid, he said, his voice low and threatening. Sienna's heart hammered in her chest, but she didn't back down. You're the one who needs to leave, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. You don't belong here. Parents had begun to notice the confrontation, their heads turning toward the truck. The driver's eyes flicked to the growing crowd, and he forced his smile back into place. All right, he said, raising his hands. No need to cause a scene. I'll move along. He slammed the service window shut and climbed into the driver's seat. The truck's engine rumbled to life, and it pulled away, the cheerful melody fading into the distance. Sienna watched it go, her hands trembling. Are you okay? The girl's mother had run over, scooping her daughter into her arms. What happened? Sienna explained what she'd seen, her voice steady but her heart still racing. The mother's face paled as she listened, and she hugged her daughter tightly. Thank you, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in. By now, other parents had gathered, and Sienna repeated her story. Some looked horrified, others angry. One father pulled out his phone, calling the police to report the incident. Sienna felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see her mother, her face a mix of concern and pride. You did the right thing, Sienna, Ellen said softly. You might have just saved that little girl. But as Sienna looked at the spot where the truck had been, a sense of unease lingered. The driver might be gone for now, but she had a feeling this wasn't the last they'd see of him. The hum of the departing ice cream truck faded into the distance, but the tension in Willow Creek Park lingered like a storm cloud. Parents huddled closer to their children, voices rising in a mixture of disbelief and anger. I can't believe this happened, one mother said, clutching her toddler tightly. Right here in broad daylight. Did anyone get his license plate? Another parent asked. Already on the phone with the police. Sienna stood near her mother, Ellen, her heart still pounding. Lucas, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, tugged at her sleeve. Can we go back to the monkey bars now? Ellen knelt in front of Lucas, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Not right now, sweetheart. We need to stay together for a little while. Sienna's thoughts raced. The driver's cold glare as he left was seared into her memory. Her instincts told her that this wasn't over, not for him. And not for her. The day's events replayed in Sienna's mind as she sat at the kitchen table, absently poking at her dinner. Lucas had already finished eating and was playing in the living room, his carefree laughter drifting through the house. Ellen watched her daughter from across the table, concern etched on her face. Do you want to talk about it? Ellen asked gently. Sienna hesitated, then set down her fork. Something about him just didn't feel right. Mom, the way he looked at the kids, the way he kept writing things down, and when he tried to get that little girl to go behind the truck. Ellen reached across the table and took Sienna's hand. You did everything right today. You trusted your instincts and protected those kids. But I can see this is still bothering you. It is, Sienna admitted. What if he comes back? Ellen sighed. The police are looking into it. And if he does come back, we'll call them again. But you've already made a difference. Sienna, you scared him off today. Sienna nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the man wasn't done. The following morning, Sienna and Lucas were walking home from a neighbor's house after a playdate when something caught Sienna's eye. Near the curb, partially hidden beneath some bushes, was a small black notebook. It looked weathered, with loose pages sticking out at odd angles. Sienna stopped abruptly, causing Lucas to bump into her. What's wrong? He asked. She pointed to the notebook. Stay here, she said, her voice firm. Lucas watched as Sienna crouched down and picked up the notebook. It felt heavier than she expected. The cover worn and scuffed. She opened it cautiously, her eyes widening as she scanned the first few pages. Dates, locations, and descriptions filled the pages. Some were as simple as 10 a.m. Willow Creek Park, girl in pink dress with stuffed bunny. Others were more detailed, listing children's names, ages, and even notes about their parents' routines. Sienna's stomach churned. This was no ordinary notebook. It was a log, a record of the driver's activities. And it confirmed her worst fears. "Sienna, what is it?" Lucas asked, stepping closer. She snapped the notebook shut, her voice shaking. "It's something I need to show Mom." Ellen's face grew pale as she flipped through the notebook later that afternoon. They were seated in the living room, with Lucas occupied in his room. It's horrifying," Ellen said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We have to take it to the police," Sienna said. "Right now." Ellen nodded, already reaching for her phone. "You're absolutely right." Within an hour, they were seated at the local police station, the notebook lying on the desk in front of Detective Laura Whitman. The detective, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, examined the notebook with grim focus. "This is a significant find," Whitman said after several minutes. "It's detailed enough to link him to multiple parks and possibly other incidents in neighboring areas. We've been hearing reports about a man fitting his description, but this is the first solid piece of evidence we've gotten." "What happens now?" Ellen asked, her arm protectively draped around Sienna's shoulders. "We'll analyze this notebook and cross-reference it with missing persons reports and other investigations," Whitman said. She looked directly at Sienna. "You've done something very brave by bringing this to us. This could help us stop him." Sienna felt a surge of determination. "What if he comes back? What if he tries again somewhere else?" Whitman's expression hardened. "If he does, we'll be ready." Over the next few days, the police worked tirelessly to uncover the man's identity. The notebook revealed a chilling pattern: parks and playgrounds across multiple towns, each entry listing details about vulnerable children. Sienna learned that the man had been spotted in other neighborhoods, always targeting isolated kids or those with distracted parents. Sienna couldn't shake the thought that the man was still out there, planning his next move. The notebook was a crucial piece of evidence, but it wasn't enough to catch him, not yet. 3 days after discovering the notebook, Sienna was walking home from school with Lucas when she spotted something that made her blood run cold. Parked near a different playground, partially hidden by trees, was another white truck. This one had the same unmarked sides, though it was slightly dirtier than the one she'd seen before. "Sienna, isn't that?" Lucas began, but she silenced him with a quick gesture. "It might be," she said quietly. "Let's keep walking." But her mind was racing. If it was the same man, he was back, and he wasn't giving up. Sienna knew she couldn't let him slip away this time. She glanced at her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Detective Whitman's number. The phone buzzed in Sienna's hand as she waited for Detective Whitman to pick up. Lucas walked beside her, occasionally glancing back at the white truck parked near the playground. The faint sound of children's laughter floated through the air, but to Sienna, it sounded unnervingly fragile against the tension building in her chest. "Detective Whitman," came the steady voice on the other end. "Detective, it's Sienna Harper," she said quickly, her voice low. "I think I see him. The ice cream truck man. He's parked near Oak Ridge Park, right by the entrance." There was a brief pause before Whitman replied. "Are you sure? It looks just like the truck from before." Sienna said. "It's unmarked, and he's standing at the window. He's doing it again. He's talking to kids." "Where are you now?" Whitman asked, her tone sharp. "I'm across the street with my brother. We're walking away so he doesn't see us." "Good," Whitman said. "Stay out of sight. I'm sending officers to your location right now." "Can you describe what he's doing?" Sienna peered over her shoulder, careful not to be obvious. The man stood at the truck's service window, handing an ice cream cone to a boy who looked about 7. His smile was the same overly wide expression Sienna remembered, and his eyes darted around the park, scanning for any adults who might be watching. "He's giving out ice cream," Sienna said. "He's smiling, but it's fake. He's focusing on kids who are alone. And he's writing in another notebook." Whitman's voice grew colder. "That matches his previous behavior. Stay put, Sienna. We'll be there soon." Sienna ended the call and turned to Lucas. "Let's go wait by Mrs. Keller's store," she said. pointing to the small convenience store a block away. "The police are on their way." "Is it really him?" Lucas asked, his voice tinged with worry. Sienna nodded. "I think so. But don't worry. This time, they'll catch him." From their vantage point near Mrs. Keller's store, Sienna kept a close eye on the playground. The man had drawn a small crowd of children around his truck, their excited voices carrying over the sound of the tinkling ice cream jingle. He leaned down to speak to one girl, who clutched a small teddy bear and looked nervous. Sienna's hands clenched into fists. "Stay away from him," she silently willed the girl. "Don't go near the back of the truck." The minutes stretched on, feeling impossibly long. Finally, the faint wail of sirens broke through the tension. Sienna watched as two unmarked police cars pulled up, followed by a marked cruiser. Detective Whitman stepped out of the lead car, her sharp gaze sweeping the area. The ice cream man froze for a split second before slamming the service window shut. He jumped into the truck's driver's seat, but the police were already closing in. Two officers blocked the truck's front and rear, leaving him no room to escape. "Step out of the vehicle," one of the officers commanded, his voice amplified by a loudspeaker. "Hands where we can see them." For a moment, it seemed like the man might comply. He opened the door slowly, one hand raised, but then, in a sudden burst of movement, he lunged back into the cab and started the engine. The truck lurched forward, narrowly missing one of the officers. Sienna's heart raced as the truck sped toward the edge of the park. The officers sprinted after it, shouting commands, while Whitman barked orders into her radio. "Block the east exit," Whitman shouted. "He's heading toward the residential streets." The truck swerved sharply, tires screeching, children screamed, and parents rushed to pull them out of harm's way. The vehicle crashed through a low wooden fence at the edge of the park and disappeared down a side street. Whitman jumped into her car, the sirens wailing as she pursued the truck. Sienna and Lucas watched from a distance, the tension in the air palpable. "Did they catch him?" Lucas asked, his voice small. Sienna shook her head, her eyes fixed on the commotion. "Not yet, but they will." Within minutes, the police had set up a perimeter, blocking off nearby streets. Helicopter blades thudded overhead, scanning the area from above. Sienna could see neighbors stepping out onto their porches, their faces a mix of curiosity and alarm. Whitman's voice came over the radio again. "Suspect has abandoned the vehicle. Officers are searching the surrounding area." Sienna's stomach churned. He was on foot now, which made him harder to track. But the police had his notebook, his truck, and the evidence he'd left behind. Hours later, Detective Whitman returned to the Harper household to update them. Her face was lined with exhaustion, but there was a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. "We've got his truck in custody," she said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "He fled on foot, but we found additional evidence in the vehicle. Another notebook, more detailed than the first." Sienna leaned forward. "Did it say anything about the kids in the park?" Whitman nodded grimly. "Yes. He had notes on multiple children he was watching, including some from today. He's been planning this for a long time. But we've got enough evidence now to tie him to at least 5 previous incidents." "Did you catch him?" Ellen asked, her voice tight. "Not yet," Whitman admitted, "but we've expanded the search. He won't get far." Sienna felt a mix of relief and frustration. They had the evidence, but the man was still out there. The events at Oak Ridge Park sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. Parents formed watch groups, patrolling parks and playgrounds to ensure their children's safety. Schools held assemblies on recognizing and reporting suspicious behavior. Using Sienna's story as an example. For Sienna, the experience had been both empowering and overwhelming. She was proud of what she'd done, but she couldn't shake the lingering fear that the man might come back. "Are you okay?" Ellen asked one evening as they sat together on the couch. "I think so," Sienna said after a moment. "I just keep thinking about how close he was to getting away with it." "But he didn't," Ellen said firmly, "because you noticed something was wrong and spoke up. You made a difference." The days that followed were tense but marked by a growing sense of resolve. The manhunt for the ice cream driver, identified as Jeremy Cole, expanded beyond their town. His name and description, along with the detailed scar by his right eyebrow, were now shared across state lines. Police departments in nearby areas were instructed to keep an eye out for him or any unmarked vehicles resembling the truck he had used. For Sienna, the fear of Cole's potential return loomed. But the outpouring of support from the community lifted her spirits. Every time a parent thanked her or another child called her brave, it reinforced her belief that she had done the right thing. 1 week later, Detective Whitman invited Sienna and Ellen to the station for an update. Sienna's palms were clammy as they stepped into Whitman's office, which was cluttered with papers, photos, and maps pinned to a corkboard. Whitman gestured for them to sit. "Sienna, I want to thank you again for your courage. Because of your quick thinking, we've uncovered a pattern in Jeremy Cole's activities." Whitman pointed to the board, where several cities were marked with red pushpins. "Cole's been targeting parks and playgrounds along a specific route. He doesn't stay in one place for long, which is how he's evaded capture until now. But the notes you found helped us establish his movements." Sienna leaned forward, studying the map. "What's the pattern?" Whitman circled 3 pins with a marker. "He tends to move in a triangle, visiting parks in one city, then driving to another about 2 hours away, and so on. Based on the evidence, we think he uses these trips to scout potential targets." Ellen frowned. "So he's been doing this for years? Just moving from place to place?" "Exactly," Whitman confirmed. "But thanks to the surveillance footage and the notebooks, we've been able to track his activity more closely. We've also found connections to several unresolved missing persons cases." Sienna's stomach churned. "So, he's taken kids before?" Whitman hesitated, then nodded solemnly. "We believe so. But with the evidence you helped us gather, we're closer than ever to stopping him." Later that evening, Sienna and Ellen returned home, their conversation still revolving around the new information. Ellen couldn't stop marveling at how Sienna had pieced things together. "You've got a sharp mind, sweetheart," she said as they set the dinner table. "Maybe you should consider becoming a detective someday." Sienna managed a small smile but didn't reply. Her thoughts were consumed by the weight of Whitman's revelation. Cole had likely hurt other children, families torn apart by his actions, and she had almost been one of the few to stop him before he could strike again. Her phone buzzed on the table, jolting her from her thoughts. It was a text from Detective Whitman. "Found something important in the notebook. Can we talk tomorrow?" The next morning, Sienna and Ellen arrived at the station to find Whitman in high spirits. "We've got him," she announced, her tone triumphant. "What?" Ellen asked, her eyes widening. "You've caught him?" "Not yet," Whitman clarified, "but we know where he's been staying." One of the notebook entries included a partial address, just a house number and a street name. It wasn't much, but we cross-referenced it with recent surveillance footage of the truck. "We've identified a property on the outskirts of town where he's been keeping the vehicle." Sienna felt a surge of hope. "Are you going to arrest him?" "We're assembling a team right now," Whitman said. "If he's there, we'll take him into custody today." That afternoon, the police surrounded a dilapidated house at the edge of a wooded area. Sienna and her family weren't allowed anywhere near the scene, but Whitman promised to keep them updated. Ellen paced the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Lucas, sensing the tension, stayed unusually quiet, his eyes darting between his mother and sister. Finally, the call came. Ellen put the phone on speaker so Sienna could hear. "We found him," Whitman said, her voice edged with satisfaction. "He tried to run again, but this time, he didn't get far." Sienna let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He's really caught?" "Yes," Whitman confirmed, "and there's more." The house was full of evidence, disguises, more notebooks, fake IDs. He'd been planning this for a long time. "Thanks to you, Sienna, he won't hurt anyone else." In the days following Jeremy Cole's arrest, the story spread quickly. Local news stations covered the dramatic raid, and Sienna's role in exposing him became a focal point. Her school held a special assembly, where she was presented with a certificate of recognition for her bravery. "It's not just about what I did," Sienna told the crowd. "It's about paying attention to the little things and speaking up when something feels wrong. If we all stay aware and look out for each other, we can make our communities safer." The applause that followed was thunderous. As weeks turned into months, the fear that had once gripped the community began to fade. Cole faced numerous charges, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. Parents in the area took new precautions, forming neighborhood watch groups and working with local authorities to improve park safety. For Sienna, life slowly returned to normal, but she never forgot the lessons she had learned or the lives she had helped save. Every time she walked through the park with Lucas, She couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of vigilance. The world wasn't always safe. But she knew now that even small actions could make a big difference.